From the earliest days of human settlement, the land we now call Europe has been shaped by conflict. Its borders, its cultures, its kingdoms, and eventually its nations all rose from the victories and tragedies of war. To understand Europe, you must first understand the battles that carved it into existence. In the distant past, long before modern countries existed, warriors moved across forests, rivers, and open fields searching for land, survival, and power. Tribes clashed over resources. Early chiefs built alliances, then broke them, as new tools and new strategies of fighting emerged. Bronze swords, wooden shields, small round forts, and simple but deadly formations began the earliest forms of organized warfare. It was here, in these early conflicts, that the foundations of Europe's war tradition were laid. As centuries passed, Europe witnessed the rise of ambitious rulers who sought to dominate entire regions. Armies grew larger, better equipped, and more disciplined. Commanders began to understand the importance of formation, terrain, and morale. Warfare was no longer chaos. It became a structure, a system, a science of survival and control. The influence of the classical world changed everything. When the Roman legions marched across Europe, they brought with them a level of military organization the continent had never seen. Their soldiers trained as one body, moved as one structure, and fought with a precision that allowed a single army to defeat forces twice its size. Rome expanded not only through political ambition, but through a relentless machine of military discipline. Their roads, walls, and forts reshaped the map of Europe, and their impact lasted long after the empire itself disappeared. But with the fall of Rome came a period of instability. Across the continent, new kingdoms formed, each led by warlords, chiefs, and emerging dynasties seeking control. Castles were built on hillsides, villages fortified themselves behind wooden palisades, and the role of the warrior became more deeply woven into society. This was a period where armored horsemen, knights, began to define European warfare. Their armor grew heavier, their horses taller and stronger. Battles were fought for land, loyalty, religion, and survival. As populations grew and kingdoms united, war became larger and more destructive. Strategic marriages created alliances, but broken promises led to long conflicts. Power shifted between families whose ambitions stretched beyond borders. Siege warfare became a defining feature of the continent. Massive stone castles were designed to withstand fire, arrows, and waves of attackers. To bring them down, armies developed new technologies such as trebuchets, battering rams, and undermining techniques that allowed them to collapse entire walls from beneath. Throughout these conflicts, European armies learned valuable lessons. They discovered that numbers alone did not guarantee victory. Discipline, communication, terrain advantage, and technological innovation became the deciding factors in combat. Archers with long-distance capabilities, infantry using pike formations, and cavalry charging with speed and impact transformed the nature of combat. But war was not only fought with weapons, it reshaped economies and societies. Kings imposed taxes to fund armies. Villagers produced food and materials for long campaigns. Wars influenced trade routes, forcing merchants to adapt to new borders and new rulers. Even culture was shaped by conflict, as songs, legends, and stories celebrated warrior heroes and tragic losses. Europe's conflicts grew even more complex with the emergence of gunpowder. Cannons shattered castle walls that had stood strong for centuries. The battlefield changed forever as firearms replaced swords and formations adapted to new dangers. Warfare became louder, faster, and more deadly. Armies reorganized themselves into professional forces. Soldiers trained year-round. Commanders developed strategies that relied on timing, precision, and coordination between infantry, cavalry, and artillery. Battles were no longer determined by brute force, but by strategy and understanding of new technologies. Religious conflicts swept across Europe, turning neighbor against neighbor. Wars of faith reshaped borders and forced entire populations to choose sides. These struggles left permanent marks on culture, identity, and politics. Even after peace was declared, the emotional scars of these wars continued for generations. As Europe moved toward the modern age, warfare expanded beyond land. Nations built powerful navies capable of controlling sea routes, protecting trade, and projecting military strength across oceans. Sea battles determined influence over colonies, resources, and global power. The rise of professional officers, military academies, and engineering schools transformed war into a highly organized institution. Industrialization then changed everything once again. Weapons became faster, stronger, and more accurate. Railways allowed armies to move across continents in days instead of weeks. Communication improved, enabling commanders to coordinate vast armies across wide distances. With every innovation, Europe's conflicts became more intense and more far-reaching. When political tensions rose, alliances formed and dissolved. Nations built large standing armies, prepared for conflicts that seemed inevitable. Propaganda, diplomacy, and fear created an atmosphere where a single spark could ignite an entire continent. Throughout all of this, one truth remained. Europe was shaped by the decisions of rulers, the ambitions of generals, and the courage or desperation of ordinary soldiers. Countless lives were changed by conflicts they did not start, but were forced to endure. By the time Europe entered the modern age, it was a land defined by its history of war. Its borders had shifted countless times. Its cultures had blended and clashed. Its traditions had been shaped by victories and losses, alliances and betrayals. The continent had emerged from a long history of conflict with a complex identity, one built from the lessons of war. The story of Europe is the story of armies marching across plains, ships crossing dangerous waters, and leaders making decisions that affected millions. It is the story of courage and fear, ambition and resistance. It is a story written not only in books, but in the landscapes themselves. Fields where battles once raged, walls that still stand, and cities rebuilt after destruction. And even today, the legacy of Europe's wars continues. Its nations carry memories of their past conflicts, and its people remember the moments that shaped their world. The modern map of Europe is not accidental. It is the result of centuries of conflict, negotiation, and reconstruction. Every border, every language region, every cultural zone has been touched by the influence of war. In the end, war did more than destroy. It shaped societies, inspired innovation, changed governments, and forged alliances that eventually gave birth to a more connected continent. Europe, for all its struggles, emerged from its long history of conflict with lessons that continue to define its future. This is the story of how war created Europe, and how Europe learned to rise from war.